to the Holy Land Uncovered. I'm Jordana Miller. Today we bring you such a special show, broadcast here inside Jerusalem's Old City, that as Israel marks 50 years since the reunification of Jerusalem, a victory hard won during the 1967 Six-Day War. As we mark 50 years since the reunification of Jerusalem, we wanted to look at the Christian role in developing this city. Joining me to do that is Reverend David Pileggi from the Christ Church here in Jerusalem. David, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me on this very important occasion today.
And in this beautiful setting.
Absolutely.
Who could say no? I want to start by asking you, your church was here in the 19th century, and they were part of a few firsts that brought other people to this city.
Yes, we actually came in the 1830s and eventually built a church in 1849. And as you said, it was the first Protestant church here in Jerusalem. But with the church came schools and hospitals and clinics and lending libraries and Western culture as we know it today, music and whatnot. And this had a huge impact on changing the face of the city of Jerusalem.
And later, when the state of Israel was in the early years and before it was founded, it helped kind of lay a blueprint for areas that would be developed. Laying a blueprint
might be a better way of saying it is that we provided before the state of Israel and during the early days of the state important services for the country, such as hospitals, such as schools, such as vocational training. We had, for example, the first hospital in Jerusalem.
Right, and the very famous former defense minister, Moshe Dayan, was born in a Christian hospital. And many Jewish artisans from the Bezalel School of Art for example, were trained in our workshops. So. And tell me a little bit about the community today in Jerusalem.
Well, we have a small but very active Protestant community. Community consists of long-term residents, people who have lived in Israel for 20 or 30 years, students who come to study at the Hebrew University. They're with us for a year or two, and then we have tourists who are here one Sunday or 2 weeks, and so it's quite a dynamic community. And even though we have a core of committed folks, we have a lot of turnover and a lot of change, and that's one of the big challenges of
I was going to ask you one of the challenges
here. Yeah, trying to build a community here in Jerusalem. It's a little bit like trying to establish a community in the middle of a Grand Central Station or Victoria Station.
Well, the Roman Catholics and the Greek Orthodox have such a presence here. It must be somewhat difficult.
Right. We're a little bit different than the Roman Catholics and the Greek Orthodox because they have an indigenous population, and we do have some, you might say, indigenous Israeli Protestants, people who've lived here for quite a long time, and they. While they are Protestants, they also consider themselves to be Israeli by culture. And there are others in our community that consider themselves to be Palestinians.
And as we mark 50 years since the city's been reunited, what does that mean for Protestants? How will they celebrate it?
Oh, well, my goodness. Well, certainly some Protestants are celebrating. There are some evangelicals and Protestants from mainline churches who see Israel's return to Jerusalem or the unification of Jerusalem as having biblical or theological significance. And so some of those folks note it and say with some satisfaction, this is important. Others celebrate. And then you might have a whole group that are either apathetic or there's a group that actually thinks this is quite terrible, and they consider 50 years of unification to be occupation.
Right, let's talk about that a little bit, because there's part of the Christian community that, of course, are Palestinians, and that they don't, this isn't a happy or joyous occasion, 50 years.
It is not, and even the division that I just described to you is actually can be seen and can be felt in our community. I think there are a few Arab Protestants in this city and in this country, not a few, but there's a minority that really appreciate the state of Israel, and they, again, think it's theologically, biblically important. And then there are many others, Arab Christians, quite a few, who are a bit ambiguous about this. And on one hand, they get benefits from the state, and they recognize that the state actually provides religious freedom for them in a way that no Muslim regime would. And on the other hand, again, they feel a little bit left out, especially in, for example, the policies of the city or the government do not take minorities always into account.
How did the other Christian communities react when the Protestants came here in the mid-19th century? Well,
the question is not only how did the Christian communities react, how did the Christian communities and the Jewish communities react? Because they felt, I think, a bit embarrassed that they had neglected their co-religionists for so long, that they had ignored Catholics here, or that Jewish communities in Europe had ignored the impoverished state of their brethren here in the Holy City. So when we came here with our medicine and our schools and our workshops, and by the way, we were the first to educate women, maybe the first in the history of the Middle East to give women an education and a vocational education. So
David, we're going to have to leave it there, but it's very interesting. Thanks so much.